Warriors, my friends, my extended family, welcome to another episode of the Anxiety Guy podcast. I'm Dennis Simsek, and whether you're listening at home, at work, on the road, I'm grateful for your time, and I'm grateful that you would put your trust in this knowledge to help you to not only heal anxiety, but to become who you deserve. Warriors, this podcast episode is brought to you by the Health Anxiety Program. 12 Weeks to Freedom from Health Anxiety begins today at theanxietyguy.com. And friends, in this podcast episode, I thought it would be a good idea to understand the differences between anxiety and fear, because I have been getting this question quite often lately on the YouTube comments. And I want to dive deep into this because a certain degree of understanding around anxiety and how it manifested is good. However, I do believe that if we begin to contemplate too much, if we begin to look to understand too much, then we're only feeding into the addiction to suffering. Because all this mental activity and looking to understand only leads us to lesser understanding. So friends, I have a few points here that I believe will speak to you. And of course, as is any time during these podcast episodes or during my YouTube videos or lives, take notes. Take notes, write stuff down. If something speaks to you, write it down. If you're going through the day and you encountered a win, a spontaneous win over your irrational fears, write that down. Journaling is very, very important in the healing process. Point number 1, when it comes to the difference between anxiety and fear, is this. Anxiety can still survive even if the conscious mind doesn't believe in what the subconscious mind believes. Ooh, this is powerful. Because you see this every single day. At a conscious level, people look at their irrational fears. At a conscious level, people look at their bodily anxiety symptoms. At a conscious level, people look at these situations they encounter that are unfamiliar and say, "This is no big deal. I can place my trust in the fact that I can handle this and, in fact, enjoy it." However, as we can see, convincing the subconscious mind and body is a completely different story, isn't it? I mean, to be honest with you, many of the anxiety sufferers that I work with through my programs are already experts at anxiety, right? I mean, if somebody came to them with a similar complaint, with similar symptoms, with similar issues, they would be able to provide such amazing advice to these people and guide them towards the healing process. But when it comes to themselves, it's a completely different story, isn't it? And so we must understand that understanding things at a conscious level, seeing beyond the fears, the irrational fears and the sensations, the symptoms and all that other stuff at a conscious level isn't enough. It just isn't enough. And when we understand this point, we can begin to look deeper into things and understand why the subconscious mind and body continue to cling on to old belief systems, outdated belief systems around what it is that we fear. Point number 2 is this. Anxiety is fear represented at a subconscious level. Okay, so anxiety isn't this thing where, at least most of the time, isn't this thing where we go about our day and say, I fear X, right? And I fear Y, and I fear Z. No. Anxiety, more often than not, shows up as initial feelings, right? It shows up as initial interpretations about things, and the conscious mind is the last to know about it. right? You're going through your day, and at some point you are aware of something that is causing your body some disruption, right? The conscious mind is the last to know what's going on. Way before the conscious mind, the subconscious mind and body have already decided whether something is fearful, whether something is safe, or whether something is neutral emotionally. And so we now understand that this fear is represented at a subconscious level, at the level of what I like to call our inner child. And so, to tell you the truth, warrior, when we can really begin and commit to this idea of working with the inner child, then what's going to happen is we will begin to treat the initial feelings, our bodies, and the irrational mental chatter as coming from our inner child, right? This is very, very powerful. And if you have children, you can begin to make the connection between your own inner child and your fears and your threats and the things that your own kids go through, right? They are highly emotional beings. Later on in life, we begin to lose that emotion and the ability to express, and therefore we begin to suppress everything. Ideas, feelings, emotions. We don't talk about things. We don't share our creative ideas. We don't explore. We're not as curious. We're not as wondrous. So much of anxiety healing is understanding that we must begin working with, rather than looking to run from, those things that cause us disruptions coming from the inner child. Point number 3 is anxiety is a chronic state. Anxiety is a chronic state and is accompanied by a high level of emotional investment into irrational fears, which have its roots within the interpretations made between conception and the age of 5. So when a symptom arises that you can't understand, conception and 5. When the mental chatter doesn't want to stop, conception and 5. When you're about to move into an unfamiliar experience and you feel this hesitation towards it and sensitivity, conception and 5. And many people out there will say, well, Dennis, I didn't really have any traumas in my life. I had a very, very good upbringing. Your upbringing has little to do with the interpretations coming from your subconscious mind and body. You may think that you have a great upbringing, but we need to understand that our definition of trauma must change, okay, in order for us to understand why our bodies react the way they do to things that it shouldn't be reacting like that towards, okay? So we made interpretations when we were younger, and we created these perceptions about ourselves and life. And more often than not, as we go through the day, if any piece, any fragment that is connected to those old interpretations show up within our environment, then the body will let us know, right? Bessel van der Kolk wrote a fantastic book with a fantastic title called The Body Keeps the Score. I highly recommend that you read that book. And so the body really does keep the score. More often than not, people get an illness or a disease and say, oh, why does this happen to me? Well, that didn't happen overnight, right? It was an accumulation of things. And the body's just letting you know that it can't store all the things that you want it to store anymore. Whether that be suppressed rage, whether that be the guilt or the blame or the fear or whatever it is. So we are beginning to understand that we must work with the body in order to change the body, okay? And none of these things are bad, okay? None of these things are bad. If something happens to your body, it's not a bad thing, okay? It's not something that we need to get frantic around, but rather we need to see it as signs and messages that we need to go deeper in our healing journeys. In essence, there is no difference between anxiety and fear. Fear is the main component of an anxiety-filled life. And as we understand more deeply that logic alone cannot convince the inner child to change its interpretations. We will be open to new, deeper ways of communicating with our own inner child. I highly recommend that you go deeper than you currently are. I highly recommend that you stay open to techniques, methods, teachers that want to share with you things that are happening at a deep emotional level. More often than not, we say, no, that's not what I believe spiritually. But all you're doing is representing your parents. You're not representing yourself. More often than not, you say, oh, I don't believe in X. No. That comes from your authority figures. That comes from your programming, your old programming. But your new programming is more so open to anything. So be willing to explore. Be willing to go deeper. Be willing to love yourself at a level that feels so fresh and so new. Because let me tell you something, warrior. When you begin to truly love every inch of your body inside and out, and when you begin to truly look within and say, my God, these emotional scars I should be proud of. I don't have to carry them with me. I can learn from them. When you begin to see things this way, you will find inner peace. And you, more than anything, are a peaceful warrior. You're working towards it, and you should be proud of this journey. My friends, if you're enjoying this podcast, please share it with someone or a group in need. And I always want you to remember that you are more than anxiety. This is a chapter in your life. This is a chapter in your healing. Learn from it in order to get to the next chapter. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
The most powerful anxiety guidebooks on true anxiety recovery are now available on Amazon. Pick up Beyond Anxiety and F Coping, Start Healing, and supercharge your healing journey today. Also visit www.theanxietyguy.com to connect with Dennis and find the right online program for you. Remember, you are more than anxiety. See you in the next podcast episode.